In the episode Kill the Alligator and Run, the Simpsons are arrested and convicted in Florida for running over and killing Captain Jack, a beloved alligator mascot. However, at the conclusion, Captain Jack emerges from the county courthouse, alive and well. The episode does not even try to provide an explanation for this. The alligator was alive the entire
Hey, you gonna get it now.
I don't see what a big deal is. It's just a stupid alligator.
Alright, gotta warn you in advance. I've got a weird one for you today, even by Simpsons Mysteries standards. We gotta exorcise this alligator ghost that has been haunting this channel. The fact that Captain Jack is both alive and in that courthouse at the episode's conclusion is already pretty darn mysterious on its own. But in this case, there's an extra meta layer to the mystery. That there was actually a deleted scene that fills in some of the gaps. The Simpsons wrote an explanation, they just chose not to air it. Why? Why would you do that? So today, let's untangle why Kill the Alligator and Run is the way it is. We're going to try to figure out why this scene was cut, could they have feasibly made room for the scene, and most importantly, does this scene actually make Kill the Alligator and Run any better? First, let's talk about the context for this deleted scene. It occurs during Act 3, right after we say goodbye to the I like that lady. We cut to the courthouse, where the sheriff is saying they're going to get it from the jury, and Homer doesn't see what the big deal is. Then they see the long procession of people waiting in line to pay their respects. A couple folks recount some fond stories, and even Kid Rock says it's a shame he's dead. Then the episode would have gone to the courtroom scene, where Homer addresses the jury as Hicks. This deleted scene can be found in the Season 11 DVD extras. In those bonus features, there's a commentary track from showrunner Mike Scully, in which he explains the situation. This scene had an animation error, where the crowd, as they panned across, was completely frozen, despite being able to hear them weeping. This was taken into consideration when deciding to cut this scene. Mike went on to say, quote, "I think it may have made the story a little confusing in the third act, when the alligator suddenly showed up coming out of the courthouse. It was one of those things where I think I became over-familiar with the show, so you assume the audience is as familiar as you are. And then when they see it the first time, it's a little confusing. So my apologies on that." Okay, so that makes sense. The animation didn't come back right, and after looking at this thing for so long, Scully became overly familiar with the plot beats. I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's why so many people accidentally made their Mario Maker levels too difficult. We lose perspective of what others actually know. However, we should also consider why Mike Scully was in that situation in the first place. He ended up cutting the scene because Kill the Alligator and Run was simply too long. The episode couldn't be run as is, Scully had to remove something. In fact, according to the DVD extras, this isn't even the only deleted scene. He also cut some additional dialogue from this balcony scene in Act 2, right before "Show me your boobs." And then there's a hotel scene where Lisa observes it's raining, but is actually beer and urine. So yeah, this episode ran really long. The Homer-Marge exchange clocks in at a little under 11 seconds. The hotel scene is about 8 seconds long. This alligator sequence, the whole thing, 38 seconds. When we put all three together, we're looking at 57 seconds of material Mike Scully cut from the episode. That strikes me as a lot. After getting rid of those first two scenes, I'm guessing he was still over by at least 30 seconds. For the sake of argument, we're going to use the full length of the deleted scene, 38 seconds, in this breakdown. But we can fudge this number a little later, since we don't know for sure. So, were there 38 seconds of Kill the Alligator and Run that could have been cut to make room for this scene? It's really easy for us to be all, "Oh, that was a bad cut, Mike," and then transfer outrage telepathically. But first, before that angry telepathy, we should take a hard look at the situation and evaluate what his options were. The funny thing about Kill the Alligator and Run is that it's a surprisingly dense episode in terms of content. I'm not going to call it the tightest 22.5 minutes of The Simpsons ever, but they pack a lot into it. The episode is, structurally, a very linear plot. One thing directly causes another thing to happen, which directly causes another. It's a chain. It's not an episode like Marge vs. the Monorail or Springfield, where they set up a plot point and then riff on it, bouncing around town to a bunch of related jokes. Like, let's look at Act 1 as an example. Homer gets the mail, finds quizzes, Lisa suggests he quizzes others. He hits up Flanders, and then Lenny and Carl. Then Marge is fed up, so he takes the health quiz and is alarmed he'll die at 42. Homer spirals into madness watching this Robert Evans interview. Marge suggests he gets mental help. He embarrasses Mr. Burns in front of an inspector and is sent to the plant psychologist. The psychologist recommends a vacation in Florida. End of Act 1. By and large, every scene is built on the previous one in some way, whether it's escalating the current situation or introducing a new plot point. Acts 2 and 3 are structured similarly. Unfortunately, there isn't this magical standalone scene that can be removed without affecting what comes before or after. Now you might be wondering, why can't we just shorten the opening credits? After all, Kill the Alligator and Run uses the full Simpsons credit sequence, which takes up about a minute 20. Boom, let's just go to the condensed version that's only 53 seconds long. Or to go further, the super short one at 25 to 30. Well, there's something up with this. It is true that Mike Scully episodes have used the shorter credit sequence in the past. In fact, in Season 9, it's only This Little Wiggy and Lost Star Lisa that used the full one. Everything else was the medium or short version. But here's the weird thing. Starting in the AABF production cycle in Season 10, every single regular episode contains full credits. All of them. This continued into the BABF run in Season 11 and the CABF run in Season 12. Interestingly, when Al Jean took over in Season 13, now we're suddenly getting the shortened intro again. So, what's the deal here? Why can't this Season 11 episode cut down the opening credits? Honestly, I have no idea, and this endeavor is way too silly to pester Mike Scully about. I also don't want him to know I bothered looking into this. Maybe it was done for cost cutting, or perhaps standardizing the episode length made the production process cleaner. Whatever the exact reason is, doesn't matter. Based on how the rest of Season 11 is, let's just assume the opening credits are off the table. So we're gonna have to get creative. Where in the episode can we find 38 seconds of material to cut instead? Well, I diced and sliced Kill the Alligator and Run into tiny little editing pieces. I deleted scenes, I trimmed them, I even used establishing shot dialogue to cover up the edit, just to get a feel of what works and what doesn't. Here's what I've found. Some moments we can't get rid of because of pacing and flow. We can't delete either of the quiz scenes because you need 2 examples before moving on to the next plot point. Sometimes a scene becomes unnaturally short, like if we tried to cut the establishing psychiatrist joke about his father. We could try getting rid of the VJ stuff, it's about 24 seconds long, and go straight to the concert. But they do introduce the situation, we get an establishing shot of Homer there, and the joke is admittedly pretty solid. Maybe we could cut this scene with Marge on the chain gang and go straight to the sheriff arriving. It establishes the whip guy, and we'd lose the line, "I'm starting to dislike the man with the whip." And let's not even talk about cutting any of the "I like that lady." She's the best part of the episode. So here are your options. These are the least obtrusive moments that I could find. Remember, we're looking for 38 seconds to get rid of. 2 seconds. After the quiz, Lenny says, "Thanks, what do we owe you?" The scene would end with Homer calling them idiots. 12 seconds. Cut the third Robert Evans interview. Homer would point to the TV, we'd cut to Marge's reaction. 8 seconds. At the concert, Homer thinks Joe C is a lost child, gets tackled. 3 seconds. Marge remarking the alligator could crawl up her toilet any day. 8 seconds. After the sheriff says they're in a heap of trouble, Homer says you'll have to catch him first, jumps into the water. 8 seconds. Escaping in the car, Lisa says they have no driver's license. Car works, Homer says it's a miracle. 6 seconds. This establishing shot. Instead, we start Act 3 with the car on the train. 6 more seconds. Homer's ADR line about being on fire before he exits the car. And finally, 8 seconds. At the end of this scene, Homer says this place is Bart and Lisa's after they get married, not paying for 2 weddings. Personally, I really like the joke of Homer jumping in the water, has some of that We Turtles energy, and cutting the lost child joke results in Joe C suddenly jumping to a different part of the stage, although you could use a Homer reaction shot to smooth this over. I think we can definitely lose the Homer-Lisa exchange in the car since we see them drive away in the next scene, and we can easily get rid of the ADR line after crashing. I suspect it was a late addition anyway. After that, I think I'd cut the 3rd Robert Evans segment, and then I guess the joke about Bart and Lisa getting married. That gets us in the 35-second range to make room for the alligator. The other alternative is cutting this alligator scene in half and only including this frozen pan across the crowd. Then you only need to free up 18 seconds. We could get rid of like the Homer-Lisa exchange, Homer's ADR line, and Marge's alligator joke. There's obviously several configurations we could do, these are just the ones I went with. If you do it differently, let me know in the comments. I'm curious how others would approach it. However, no matter what we end up picking, we always end up deleting some of the comedy from the episode, just to make room for some exposition. Restoring a deleted scene ain't free. If we had to delete Homer jumping into the water, for example, I think it would make the episode slightly worse. It's the old Ian Malcolm problem. Just because we can, doesn't necessarily mean we should. When it's all said and done, is the ending of Kill the Alligator and Run fixable in the edit? I sat down and watched my The Real Jim's cut of the episode with the deleted scene included. Hell, I watched a supercut with all the deleted scenes. And you know, I'm not convinced it's an improvement. Naturally, the main benefit of including the scene is that it explains why Captain Jack emerges from the courthouse at the conclusion. We saw him earlier, so here he is again. That plot point flows pretty well now. However, the significant downside I hadn't considered is the additional face time we now get with the alligator. It shines a further spotlight on how nobody noticed that Captain Jack wasn't actually dead. Why didn't anybody check? I mean, clearly the Simpsons weren't convicted over evidence, with Homer's opening speech and all. That part checks out from a comedy perspective. But by actually showing the alligator's body in Act 3, you're further telegraphing to the audience that it's dead. It's like the confirmation scene. In the original cut, we see them hit Captain Jack, his body float to the surface, and that's it. Him being alive isn't explained, but I always assume some shenanigans happened behind the scenes. Maybe someone covered it up because they were mad he was hit. Maybe he was always in a coma, and they convicted the Simpsons anyway. Maybe he's only pretending to be dead, because he realized his scheme had misfired. Wait a minute, that makes even less sense. To make a long story short, I think there's an argument that having no information forces the audience to fill in the gaps with their imagination, whereas providing a small tidbit of info opens you up to more scrutiny. When it comes down to it, the alligator being alive the entire time will always be a stumbling block in the story. Personally, when it's all said and done, I would rather have 5 or 6 extra jokes than to try to jam through some muddled exposition. But hey, it was worth a shot. Can't say I didn't try. I remember once hearing a commentary or interview from one of the showrunners. I don't remember if it were Mike Scully or Bill Oakley or Matt Selman or who exactly, but they were describing how it's always the troublesome episodes that end up getting the most time and energy put into them, trying to quote-unquote fix them. They're the episodes the writers work hardest at, whether it's in the rewrite process or in the edit. I think sometimes in fandom, we look at a bad episode or a baffling decision and say, oh, the writers didn't care to fix it. They just kind of gave up and shoved it out there. I know that I memed on the episode back in the day in the 60-second Simpsons days. I think there are so many situations exactly like Kill the Alligator and Run, where there are logical problems with the script, then the episode comes in too long, with animation errors, and the showrunner gets backed into a corner. The nature of animation makes it difficult to go backwards once the train has left the station. I think it's incredibly gracious of Mike Scully for offering an explanation and even saying sorry for it. That's very nice of him, but come on, there's no need to apologize over making a tough call in the edit. I think with the frozen animation, being forced to delete 5 or 6 jokes elsewhere, and the fact that it doesn't even totally fix the ending, yeah, I totally get the decision now. It took me tediously cutting up the entire episode on my own, but I get it. I think Kill the Alligator and Run is a good example of how issues can snowball early on in the process, how a questionable plot point is often the result of making the best out of a bad situation. Look, I still don't think Kill the Alligator and Run is a good episode. It's just too all over the place and incoherent for my taste. It's not my thing. But I admit, after covering this episode so much for this channel, I have developed a fondness for it and that dumb alligator. To quote the great Mr. Teeny, this plot made no sense. And to quote old Velma, I like that.